on the Nets. The primary team calling the Nets' phones is the Los Angeles Lakers, who are trying to trade for Kyrie Irving. However, according to a recent report from Brian Lewis of the New York Post, Irving plans on playing for the Nets next year. He has not yet requested a trade, and it looks like he has no plans to do so. Another source close to Irving told the Post that the All-Star point guard not only never asked for a trade, but has had every intention of playing for the Nets, with or without Durant, Lewis wrote. There were rumblings before the NBA draft that Brooklyn could look to trade Irving, but instead, he ended up opting into his player option and committing to rejoining the Nets next year. However, with Durant asking the Nets for a deal, having Irving around without Durant doesn't make a ton of sense for Brooklyn. It was reported that they won't commit to him long-term, so trading him is probably their best option. Irving is one of the best point guards in the league and probably the most skilled point guard of all time, but with how much off-court drama he's brought with him, the Nets would probably prefer to free themselves of him. So, while
it's been over 2 weeks since Kevin Durant shocked the basketball world by requesting a trade away from the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets haven't been able to find a suitable package in return for the 12-time All-Star, with rumors and speculation quieting in recent days. Despite the slowdown, Brooklyn is still shopping Durant and aiming as high as ever, per ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. When it comes to a possible trade with the Raptors, the Nets wouldn't even consider a deal, unless it included reigning Rookie of the Year winner Scottie Barnes, says Wojnarowski. Toronto has no intention of moving the budding star, with the Barnes trade reportedly considered a non-starter last week. It's understandable why both sides are sticking to their guns. Durant is one of the greatest NBA players of all time, and has 4 years remaining on his contract. Any team that acquires the 33-year-old would instantly become a contender, so the Nets should rightfully be seeking as big a haul as possible in return. The Raptors are reluctant to give up Barnes, because the 20-year-old has sky-high potential on both sides of the ball, and figures to be a franchise cornerstone for much longer than the 4 seasons Durant would be under contract. Even without Barnes, Toronto still has plenty of assets to make an intriguing offer to Brooklyn. Some combination of Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr. and Anunoby plus draft picks could eventually entice the Nets, if this saga continues to drag on, and Durant reiterates his stance that he wants out. Last week, ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski reported that Barnes was a non-starter for the Raptors in any Durant discussion. Well, on Get Up a few days later, Wojnarowski mentioned once again that Toronto isn't looking to trade Barnes and added that the Nets wouldn't consider a deal with the Raptors that doesn't include the Rookie of the Year. Toronto doesn't want to part with Scottie Barnes. That's their stance, Wojnarowski said. Brooklyn right now wouldn't consider a deal without Scottie Barnes. On July 6, NBA insider Mark Stein reported that Brooklyn privately maintains it won't trade Durant unless it gets a package in return that features a blue chipper, naming the Pelicans' Brandon Ingram and Raptors' Barnes as examples. The Raptors selected Barnes with the number 4 pick in the 2021 NBA draft. The move surprised many at the time, but it didn't take long for Barnes to showcase his star potential, proving himself to be one of the most sought-after prospects in the NBA. As a rookie, Barnes averaged 15.3 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists and 1.1 steals per game. Durant himself had high praise for Barnes after the two faced off this season, and was stunned by his maturity. I think a lot of young guys in the league have that competitive fire, but he has something a little extra as far as seeing the game a little slower, and that's rare for a guy. How old is he? 19, 20. Sheesh, Durant said. The Suns and Heat are two teams known to be on Durant's wish list. The Raptors, meanwhile, have been mentioned as looking as a potential landing spot for the 12-time All-Star. According to Wojnarowski, there are other teams in the mix. There are still other teams out there, but I think for the Nets, because Kevin Durant's got 4 years left on his deal, this is different than Kawhi Leonard 4 years ago, when he was going into the last year of the deal. That situation had hung over the Spurs, Wojnarowski continued. It was right around this time they moved Leonard. There's no deal imminent for Brooklyn, but they are still trying to find a trade for Durant.
The Washington Wizards inked Bradley Beal to a massive extension this summer, which could allow him to stay on the roster through the 2026-27 season. With that being the case, rebuilding won't really be an option for the Wizards. Beal is a top 15 player in the NBA, so having him on the roster automatically makes them a playoff contender. So, in tandem with that, they should be trying to put a quality team around him every season. They have a good start right now, but trading some young pieces for win-now players could be a smart decision. Rui Hachimura and Denny Avdija both play the same position, so trading one could be useful, and since Hachimura's contract is ending soon, he would probably be the choice. Here are 3 NBA trades involving Hachimura for the Wizards to consider. Wizards receive Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent. Heat receive Rui Hachimura, Monty Morris, Anthony Gill, 2026 second-round pick. This deal may seem a bit weird at face value, but it could actually turn out well for both teams, as each squad would be filling a position/role of need on their squad. For the Heat, losing PJ Tucker in free agency was a huge blow. They would be able to take a chance on Hachimura as their power forward, and in their developmental system, he could shine. Giving up Vincent may sting, but getting back a quality backup in Morris, a decent bench player in Gill, and a second-round pick could make it worth it for them. As for Washington, they would be adding a resident sharpshooter to the roster, as they desperately need extra shooting. Vincent would also get a chance to play an expanded role in Washington. Wizards receive Jared Vanderbilt. Jazz receive Rui Hachimura, 2026 second-round pick. This is by far the simplest of all the trades listed here, but it would accomplish a goal for each team involved. Both squads are reshaping their rosters, and this deal would move the needle in their respective directions. Starting off with the Jazz, this deal sees them land a potential-filled forward heading into the final year of his contract. Hachimura has shown flashes of stardom but just hasn't put it all together yet. In Utah, where the team looks to be headed for a massive rebuild, he would get plenty of developmental minutes that he wouldn't be able to play in Washington, as the Wizards will be looking to compete for the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Wizards would be getting an elite role player who showed a ton of promise last season. Vanderbilt was crucial to the Minnesota Timberwolves' success and would play a similar role in Washington. Vanderbilt fits in better with what the Wizards are doing. His hustle play and solid all-around defense would pair beautifully with Kristaps Porzingis in the frontcourt. While Hachimura is the better offensive player and may even have the higher ceiling, Vanderbilt is the better fit for this current Wizards core because of the defense he brings. Plus, he's under contract for 2 years on a team-friendly deal. Wizards receive Seth Curry, T.J. Warren. Nets receive Rui Hachimura, Corey Kispert, 2025 first-round pick, lottery protected. This trade would not be able to happen until a few days into October because the Nets just signed Warren, but after that time, or even a few weeks into the season, this could be a good deal for both teams. If the Nets trade Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, then they'll have little need for these 2 veterans on their roster. Trading them for 2 young players and a pick could be a good idea. Hachimura would have a chance to thrive in Brooklyn with a heavier workload and more freedom to play his game. The same can be said for Kispert, who has all the tools to be an elite NBA role player. On the flip side, the Wizards would be adding 2 high-end role players to their roster. Both players would be immediate contributors alongside Beal and Kristaps Porzingis. Curry would provide them with elite 3-point floor spacing and could slot in as the team's backup shooting guard. Or, if they wanted to mix things up, they could run him and Beal in the backcourt together. Meanwhile, Warren would give them some amazing forward depth. They could either start him at power forward.
While all signs are pointing to the Los Angeles Lakers inevitably trading for Kyrie Irving, the purple and gold cannot bank on that being the team's only option to get Russell Westbrook off the roster. There has to be a backup plan, not just to execute in case they don't get Irving, but to use as leverage to get Irving at a cheaper price. The Indiana Pacers were a team that was connected to the Lakers, and with the Phoenix Suns matching DeAndre Ayton's offer sheet from Indiana, the team could be a candidate again. Another possible trade partner for the Lakers is the Utah Jazz. Utah is listening to offers for superstar Donovan Mitchell as the team blows it up for draft picks this summer. Not only is Mitchell available, but so is every veteran player. Thus, the Lakers could look to dump Westbrook's salary to Utah to get contracts in return. There is a lot going on in this package, and the initial response from both fanbases when they see a trade like this is typically visceral. Lakers fans probably don't want to make a trade that does not have a star in return, while Utah fans don't want to see Westbrook on their team. However, at the end of the day, this trade package makes sense for both parties involved. In the following pages, we will explain why both the Lakers and the Jazz should say yes to this potential Russell Westbrook trade. It goes without saying, but the main reason why the Lakers should say yes is that it gets Westbrook off the team. Los Angeles is actually better off next season if Westbrook simply does not play. If they can turn that into actual rotation players in return, then that would be great for the team. While this does not get Kyrie Irving in return, it does give the Lakers more depth and more monetary flexibility in the future. Most importantly, it only includes the Lakers sending one draft pick. Mike Conley might not be a great asset at this point in his career, but he is someone who can succeed without the basketball in his hands, unlike Westbrook. Conley does not need a high usage rate to be happy, and more importantly, he makes half of what Westbrook does. He is under contract for another season, but it is partially guaranteed. If things get too bad, the Lakers could float that partially guaranteed expiring in trade packages next summer. Jordan Clarkson is a fantastic scoring role player that is also a clutch client, so there probably is some desire there to return to Los Angeles. Clarkson isn't the best defender, and he does have 2 more years left on his deal. His trade value is not that high as a result. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is thrown in to make the money work, and he could be someone who the Lakers get their hands on and develop. He has not shown anything special thus far in his career, but he is only 23 years old. The Lakers need to keep a roster spot open for Cole Swider, so they send back Kendrick Nunn and Wenyen Gabriel to keep the number the same. Swider will replace Gabriel in the rotation, and Clarkson will replace Nunn. Danny Ainge is obviously in the business of blowing it up, starting over and hoarding assets to create a new foundation in Utah. While we all want to believe that the Lakers' 2027 first-round pick won't be a great one, with the way the organization has operated, the Jazz would have to like their chances. Plus, Utah is not getting this much in value if they were going to trade these pieces individually. Alexander Walker has no trade value, Clarkson is likely not warranting a first-round pick in a trade, and Mike Conley is a negative asset for Utah. No team is lining up calling for Conley at this point in his career. With this trade, the Jazz get complete salary cap freedom after the 2022-23 season, as they are trading 2-year contracts in Clarkson and Conley for an expiring in Westbrook. The team is obviously in the business of tanking for Victor Wembanyama this season, and this helps accomplish that. Utah is taking on $11.2 million more in salary, but the team could buy out Westbrook and save another $5 minus $6 million in
One of the more important free agent dominoes fell Thursday when the Suns retained DeAndre Ayton, matching the 4-year, $133 million offer sheet the center signed with the Pacers. Ayton, who turns 24 on July 23, was a restricted free agent after failing to sign an extension with Phoenix last summer. He averaged 17.2 points and 10.2 rebounds per game for the Suns last season, helping the team finish the regular season with the best record in the NBA. Ayton's signing should have some significant ripple effects around the league, as he was frequently mentioned as a possible trade chip in a Kevin Durant trade, while the Pacers are still searching for an upgrade at center. Here's a quick breakdown on what the Ayton signing means for the Suns, Nets, and Pacers. Even after an ignominious Game 7 defeat against the Mavericks, the Suns are bringing back most of the roster that won 64 games in 2021-22. Phoenix's starting 5 should be the same for the 3rd straight season with Ayton in tow, and key bench contributors such as Cameron Payne and Cam Johnson have stuck around as well. On the surface, keeping the core of the franchise's best team together is a no-brainer. As ugly as Phoenix's Game 7 loss was, there's enough evidence to believe this group can compete for a title in a loaded West. On the court, Ayton is a perfect fit with Chris Paul and Devin Booker. He's versatile on both ends of the floor, and he's improving as both a very defensive scorer and team defender. And he should continue to grow as a player as he enters his prime, particularly as he plays in more high-stakes postseason games. The financial commitment is a good sign as well. With Ayton back, as presently constructed, the Suns will be paying the luxury tax for the first time since 2009, a sign ownership is willing to foot the bill necessary to win a title. Off the court, Phoenix's extended song and dance with Ayton was awkward at best. By not extending him last season, the Suns essentially avoided giving Ayton a 5-year contract worth even more annually, forcing him to find an outside offer. Was that worth whatever effect it had on the team's chemistry? Ayton hardly played in the second half of that Game 7 loss to Dallas, with Monty Williams sternly calling it an internal issue after the game. Though Phoenix rather quickly matched Ayton's offer, it hasn't exactly made him feel wanted the past year. It's an odd tactic to employ with a former number 1 pick who has become a key cog of a title contender, especially when he has room to grow. Relationships seemed strained in Phoenix by the end of the season. Aligning everyone's motivations ahead of a title chase will be as tantamount to this team's success as what's happening in between two baskets. Bottom line, the Suns are going to have a really high floor as long as Ayton, Booker and Paul are playing together. But don't be shocked if Ayton's name pops up in trade rumors at some point during the life of this contract. Speaking of trades, a Kevin Durant to Phoenix deal is a lot less likely in the aftermath of the Ayton signing. Even if the Nets were reportedly cool on Ayton as a player, whether that's real or draft pick posturing, a sign-and-trade involving him made a lot of sense in Durant hypotheticals. Because the Suns matched an offer sheet for Ayton, he can't be traded until January 15th at the earliest, and he can veto any trade in the first year of his deal. That means he can't be dealt this summer, and if he gets shipped to some third team in your favorite Durant fake trade, Ayton can nix that with a wave of a finger. I like to believe trades are officially vetoed Dikembe Mutombo style. It's not impossible for the Suns to trade for Durant now, but it becomes much trickier without being able to involve Ayton. If the signing takes Phoenix out of the running for Durant, now KD has one fewer team on his list of destinations that can feasibly acquire him. Maybe that helps a team like the Heat. Or maybe it emboldens a small market team like the Grizzlies. Or maybe it convinces the Nets to bring Durant back, which maybe has implications for Kyrie Irving, which maybe has an impact on what the Lakers do this summer. I was serious about this being a major domino. With an important team taking a step back in the Durant sweepstakes, the Nets may have a little more leverage in trying to bring Durant back for another season, or for creating stronger bids from teams not on KD's wishlist. The Durant situation will likely continue to drag out for the foreseeable future.
Kevin Durant has publicly supported friend and teammate Kyrie Irving, then requested a trade from the Nets, reportedly because he disliked how they treated Irving. But what if Durant had the complete opposite reason for requesting a trade? There's a school of thought, speaking to people around the league, that they think that the Durant trade request wasn't actually about him getting out of Brooklyn. It was about getting Kyrie out of Brooklyn. Durant signed a 4-year contract extension with the Nets when Irving couldn't sign his own extension. Durant then requested a trade after Irving opted in to return to the Nets. Without knowing anything else, that sequence might make it look like Durant wanted to stay in Brooklyn without Irving. But this would make sense only if Durant issued an unreported me or Kyrie ultimatum in conjunction with his trade request. Otherwise, how would the Nets know to trade Irving and not Durant? Brooklyn ownership, management would probably welcome that. The brass appears far more frustrated with Irving than with Durant. Instead, the Nets reportedly want to handle Durant's trade saga before addressing Irving. I can grant that if he wants to stay in Brooklyn without Irving, Durant would have a tough time executing that plot cleanly. Irving reportedly wants to stay with the Nets, if you buy that, and Durant has shown to care about his personal relationship with Irving. Durant trying to get Irving traded might look quite convoluted. But this theory mostly sounds like more overly conspiratorial thinking by NBA insiders. Teams such as the Phoenix Suns, Miami Heat, and Toronto Raptors have emerged as potential suitors, but no deal has gotten done yet because the Nets' asking price is sky high. In turn, other teams around the league have been asking about other pieces on the Nets. The primary team calling the Nets' phones is the Los Angeles Lakers, who are trying to trade for Kyrie Irving. However, according to a recent report from Brian Lewis of the New York Post, Irving plans on playing for the Nets next year. He has not yet requested a trade, and it looks